How do you feel like, as someone that was on the outside of Joe's departure from Fightful, how do you feel like that maybe affected Late Night Grin?
Hey, friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And you're watching Tom Talks Rubbish.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Trash, and stand back for another interview. This time, I'm joined by Robert Oneil from the Late Night Grin. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, pal. You know, we've been trying to do this for a couple of weeks. I'm glad we finally got to take care of it here.
Yeah. So if we take this back, where do you first discover wrestling as a fan?
Yeah, so I remember, I watched some of the Monday Night War stuff with my neighbor, and then I kind of got out of it, before WCW, stopped, just because, I don't know, I got busy with school and stuff. I was pretty young, so, and I got back into it, kind of around WrestleMania 18. I remember kind of flipping through, and, Raw was on. They were doing the Rock and Hogan stuff, and I'm like, well, I recognize those guys, so I'm going to watch this again. And so from there, kind of started just watching every week. In the fall, SmackDown really kind of kicked up with, SmackDown 6 and all that, and Guerrero and Edge and Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar, and just kind of got back into it. Would watch it kind of every week for the next 5 or 6 years. Then 2008, I stopped again because it's Angle's gone now. Eddie obviously is gone now. Brock's gone now. So it's all the guys I like aren't really here anymore. So I'm maybe I'll take a break. And, I was going to high school. So it's well, maybe I'll find some other stuff to occupy my time. So I didn't watch it from 2008 to 2010, which from what I've heard, I didn't really miss much.
As someone that was watching during that time, you did.
Yeah.
If I'm being totally honest.
So, I'm just hanging out early 2011. I'm oh, the Royal Rumble's on tonight. So, I went on my laptop and found, a place to watch it. And it wasn't a very good Rumble. It was the year that they went to 40 people. And it was just
the year that Alberto Del Idiot won.
Yeah, that too.
I thought
I'm
so.
I don't even know who this guy is. And I'm well, whatever. So, kept kind of watching on and off. And then, The Rock came back to host WrestleMania, and I'm oh, cool. He's back. Let's see what this is. And, then I watched that WrestleMania. That wasn't very good either. Kind of paid attention a little bit. And then all the CM Punk stuff started happening, the pipe bomb and, Money in the Bank and all that. And that got me really back in because, he's from Chicago. I was still in Chicago at that time. So really kind of got hooked on him. And since then, just kind of watched every week. Thought about stopping the past couple of years, but now they're kind of riding the ship over there. AEW is good too. So now I'm mostly back in, just kind of, I watch every week. I don't necessarily watch closely every week, but it's always on, and if there's a match that I want to see, I watch it, and it's been good. It's been particularly good the past 3 or 4 months or so. I think both companies have been really good. So I'm glad overall I got back into it. I've met a lot of good people, which we'll get into throughout the course of this. But that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it.
So to unpack a bit, because you went a lot deeper, a lot quicker than I thought you would. Yeah. So with that whole 2002 fandom, being a work rate era, that is really, really hard to say. You strike me as someone that prefers moves over character. Is that correct?
It really depends. I liked SmackDown more than Raw at that time. Like I said, Kurt Angle and Rey Mysterio, Brock Lesnar, all that. And then on Raw, it was just the Triple H and Kane stuff, which wasn't very good. And so, so at that point I was, but there's been characters that I've gotten into over the course of time. I liked The Undertaker when he came back as the actual, Undertaker after WrestleMania 20. That was cool. It really depends. It's kind of era specific. Right now, I don't think I'm necessarily a moves guy, and that's just because I think in ring wrestling is just so good right now. Like everyone can do moves. It's just like you got to separate yourself.
It's definitely a time where like you can do all the moves, but if you haven't got a good character, you're boring.
Yeah,
like having a good wrestling match. I don't know if you agree with this, Nadi. It's like having a bad wrestling match is like having a semi-bad pizza. A semi-bad pizza is still pretty decent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
In that sense. So if we continue to sort of the 2008 time, did you said that you got drove away by all the guys you grew up with basically not being there, but did you then have anything that you've gone back since getting back in 2011 from 2008 to 2011ish that you've gone back and watched and gone, oh man, I wish I was watching during this era?
No, honestly, not really. Like I want to someday, but like from what I've heard, it wasn't very good. Actually, the Undertaker Edge, like Hell in a Cell stuff, I did watch that. I went back and watched it. That's good, yeah. The Shawn Michaels Ric Flair WrestleMania match I've seen. The Shawn Michaels Undertaker WrestleMania match. So like, the really, really big stuff I've seen, but like I haven't gone back and watched Raw and SmackDown every week from that era. Because I know Raw, they had the guest host stuff, and it doesn't seem like it was all that good.
If I could recommend something, because you just didn't bring it up, and if you bring it up, that's fine, is Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho had an amazing feud in 2008.
Yes.
Have you seen that? Yeah.
I have. I've seen the match. I haven't seen the whole feud. I've seen, the one big match, and I've seen, Jericho throwing Michaels into the TV, and that's one of the things I really liked in on Raw, kind of in the time that I was watching, leading up to WrestleMania 19. That was awesome too. So, yeah, I do like both their feuds.
Fair enough. So, as we move on, what is your current consumption of wrestling for either Late Night Grin or any of the other places you work? And what would you be watching if you weren't involved with them?
So honestly, and this is something we can get into more as well, like WWE Network and Peacock have been huge because I have gone back and watched a lot of stuff, like because growing up I didn't really get into it until WCW was gone, so I didn't really have any frame of reference for WCW. So I've gone back and watched some of that stuff. It's all quite good. I decided to do this thing where, because I was born at the end of 1992, so I'm like, I'm gonna watch everything, starting 1993 to like 2001, just to see everything I've missed. So I've been doing that. That's been fun. I'm in like the middle of 1993 right now. As far as what do I watch? Like, current day, it's usually I'll watch Raw. I generally pay attention to it, but now Monday Night Football back, I focus on that as well. I haven't really gotten too into NXT 2.0. I'll watch the specials. I don't watch it every week though. It's fine. Dynamite usually I'll watch every Wednesday, and then Fridays have gotten interesting because Late Night Grin was on Friday for the first year that we did it. So we've only been on Thursdays for like 6 weeks now. So Fridays weren't really open. Fridays was like, I work till 5 and then have to eat dinner and whatever, try and watch these shows. And then we do a show from what would be like 10 to 1 my time. So, I'd watch Rampage just because we'd talk about it. But like SmackDown, I'd miss a fair amount of the time over the summer. Plus, Roman wasn't always there. And, there's a decent chunk of time this year in particular where SmackDown was like only interesting when Roman and Sasha Banks were there, and then neither one was.
Agree. Yeah, I would agree with that.
For most of the summer, like neither one was there, so it was just like, well, could probably skip that. But yeah, now I'll usually watch SmackDown, and I haven't watched Rampage the past few weeks just because now that we don't do the show on Fridays, it's kind of like it's weird, like. I get off work on Fridays and it's like, oh, I have the whole night to myself now. It's not like this obligation where I have to, and after SmackDown, it's like, do I really want to watch another hour of wrestling? Like if I hear something is good on Rampage, I'll go back and watch it, Saturday morning or whatever, but it's just nice to have some time to yourself. It's a lot of wrestling out there, man. And you can't watch it all at once,
Yeah. So you talked about having time to yourself and things like that, but what have you put in place to make sure that maybe you don't get to the stage where you got burned out of wrestling again and like stuff like that, to make sure you still enjoy it whilst being a part of Late Night Grin?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just as simple as like I look at the card, and if it's not something that I think I'm gonna really like, I won't watch it live. I'll go back and watch it, on DVR the next day and just kind of skip through some stuff. And so I'll still be watching and I'll be aware of what happens, but I don't need to watch every second of every show, just because it is a lot. If you watch all the WWE and AEW shows, even that's just like 10 hours a week, and it adds up.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you connect with Joe Holbert and the Late Night Grin crew?
That's actually a really good question. So I connected with Joe before the other two, I believe, and we followed each other on Twitter. And it's interesting because I was like a really big WWE guy. When AEW started, I'm like, well, I'm never going to watch that. That's bad. They can't come for WWE like that. One of those people. And it's like, whatever.
Tribalism.
And, yeah, exactly. I was real bad about that. We can get into that in a little bit because there's a story there too. Joe watched it, but he also enjoyed AEW as well, and I don't think he always agreed with me or liked the stuff I said or whatever. But either way, we were friends, and it eventually led to Joe and Jeremy, and we'll get into that part a little bit too. Being like, hey, we're gonna do this WWE, draft show of the Distraction. So I was on that, and Jack Crosby was on that, and that's kind of how I started having an on-screen thing with them. But the funny part of all that was when I was doing this whole WWE's great, everything else is bad stuff, kind of made an enemy out of Sean Ross Sapp. Yeah, so we blocked each other. We were just not cool with each other at all for long, and we are now. I met him at the Royal Rumble. We talk quite a bit now. We're friends, but Joe kind of took a risk being like, hey, I'm gonna bring him on a Fightful show for this draft for the Distraction, because I think another thing, on Twitter, it's easy to kind of not fully know how a person is. I'm different on Twitter than I am in person.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm much more mellow in person. I just, it's hard to kind of always tell someone's tone on Twitter too. So it's so when you actually talk to me in this format, you'll be surprised I'm a little different than how I am on Twitter. Yeah. But so yeah. But, only having that kind of frame of reference, Sean Ross Sapp was like, hey, why are you guys bringing this guy on to Fightful, just to be on one of our shows? And, it paid off for Joe. And, that turned into eventually a weekly thing on the Distraction, and then the Late Night Grin, which we'll get kind of more into in a little bit.
How do you feel as someone that was on the outside of Joe's departure from Fightful, how do you feel that maybe affected Late Night Grin?
It was interesting because I'm on the outside, but I was also on the Distraction, so it kind of affected me.
That's true. I didn't actually think of that.
Yeah. So it's it was weird because I'm by that point, it was January of this year. So it's Late Night Grin had been a thing for...
Jesus, was that long ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. So Late Night Grin by that point had been a thing for... whenever CM Punk came back to AEW, so August. But also we were doing some stuff before that because Joe and Jeremy had a Patreon. That was Late Night Grin became that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Joe and I were doing shows on that as early as last April. So, but when he left, I'm well, it's sad because I won't be on the Distraction anymore. But now if he's going to go all in on this thing that I'm actually genuinely invested in instead of just, I'm a part of it. Whereas the Distraction, credit to Jeremy, he's great. I love him. I'm glad that he brought me on, but it's different.
Check out an interview of him on my channel.
Yes. It's different though, when you're you're doing your own thing compared to when you're just on someone else's thing.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a mixed thing, oh, this is going to benefit our channel, but I also am going to miss doing my part on the Distraction and, the work we were able to do with Jeremy as well. So it was a lot of mixed feelings when Joe left, because I knew it was going to be different, but it's been good.
Did you have a moment where it was okay, we're not going to succeed now. I'm going to have to find something else to talk about my wrestling fandom? No, not really. It
It hasn't really been too bad. We kind of all just get along well, and it just it's been good, man. Like we kind of, whenever there is conflict, it's easy to resolve, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying like conflict between you lot, but I'm just saying like with Joe not having the Fightful name behind him anymore. I mean, like, did you not ever have a moment where it was like, okay, this might not succeed if he's not with Fightful?
I guess to an extent, but like I never really thought of, when I was on the Distraction, I never really thought of it as like, I'm going to turn this into like a full-time thing, because, you know, I have an actual job too, so that helps. Like, you know, so it's like the Late Night Grin, it's just the Fightful stuff was just kind of extra, being able to have a place to talk about wrestling, and then that's what the Late Night Grin has been too. And it's just like, I was never really concerned that I wasn't going to have a place.
Okay. Yeah. So you talked about being different when you were on the Distraction to how you are on the Late Night Grin, because that's more of your thing, for lack of a better word. So how would you describe yourself as different? And then why would you describe yourself as different, I should say?
Well, I think the first thing, you know, when I was on the Distraction, it was just like a 3-minute thing about whatever I wanted to talk about that week. And then, you know, we do a post show and it's just, you know, the chat talks about whatever. And that was an hour. So that's fine. You know, the Late Night Grin itself, usually 3 or 4 hours, you know, we kind of all have to bring talking points. You know, we have to have some stuff to talk about because there's a lot of time to fill. And, you know, it never had to be 3 or 4 hours, but that just kind of the first couple were. And then we're just like, oh, this is how long it's going to be. So definitely the length has been something to adjust to. And then, you know, when you're in a position where you're a guest on a show, you can kind of let other people steer. But when you're, you know, a co-host, you have to kind of be in charge. And when there are guests on the show, you have to kind of be in that role. So it was kind of an elevated thing. And, you know, even in the past month, you know, Joe's been kind of busy with some stuff and I've taken to just hosting some shows, and that's been a whole process too. Like I've had to learn how to do that too. You know, you have to really take charge in that role. So it's been a process.
What were, with hosting some shows, what were some things that you immediately noticed that were different from being like would an anchor be the word? Like do you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think of the word, to being an anchor. And then what are some things that you'll now use when you are an anchor that you've taken from hosting skills, basically?
Yeah, so the biggest thing was like, if you're the host, you're kind of responsible for just eliminating like all silences. You know, if a talking point comes to an end and no one has anything else to say, you kind of have to bring up the next one. You know, you have to make sure also you get everyone's kind of input before you move on. It's like, there's a lot of stuff going on at once where, you know, when we're just doing a show and it's just Joe hosting or Matt hosting, like it's a lot easier because I can just be like, oh yeah, here's my take when they throw it to me. And then they'll go to, you know, Oracle or whatever and, you know, come back to me. But when you're hosting, you have to just kind of steer the ship. And, you know, it's not something that I thought I was going to be super good at or super comfortable with, but after doing it 2 or 3 times, I feel good about it now. And, you know, and it has helped when I'm in the other role because, you know, you kind of know, oh, obviously he's going to keep things afloat, but I can do it too now. I'm able to do that. I know how to do that. You know, I can bring up points and yeah, it's been good.
But the big question is, if they did step away from Late Night Grin permanently, would you be comfortable taking over permanent co-hosting duties?
It would really depend, you know, because like the thing is, like, especially with Joe, like he does shows every day. So if he stepped away, we'd probably just be we'd probably be done, to be honest with you, because he just does stuff every day. You know, he does hours and hours of content every week, and like I'd still be down to do, you know, one show a week or whatever, but I don't have like the time to do it all. Do I think I have the ability? Yeah, probably, but just it'd be a time thing, and just like it wouldn't feel the same, you know? So yeah, if he ever left, or, you know, Matt ever left, or even if Oracle ever left, I don't think we'd really even want to keep it going at that point, just because we have such a chemistry with the 4 of us, and we just built this thing. And even Jay Shell, when she's there, I know she's in school now, but, you know, when she's around, so it's interesting in that regard, where we're this unit now.
What is something speaking of the unit, What is something you feel like you bring to Late Night Grin that your co-hosts do not?
So I'm definitely more into WWE than any of them. Matt doesn't watch it at all. Joe watches it sparingly. Oracle will watch it occasionally, but I'm watching it every week. So, and it's kind of an AEW centered channel just by how it was formed. It came when CM Punk came and the business was hot, and AEW's cooled off a little bit, but the audience we built is pro AEW. But in that, there's still a handful of people who like WWE, and I want to be able to talk about that with them. We have a WWE show that we do on Twitch every week, Fed Dead Redemption, and it's important. We want to talk about all wrestling, and even if that's just WWE and AEW, because I know none of us watch Impact because it's on during Late Night Grin, but it's good to have. You don't want to just be, it's 4 guys talking about AEW every week. Like, that's boring, and
Yeah, definitely. So if you talked about their wanting to quit if Joe walked away, do you think that's because it just wouldn't be the same because you built up as a unit now, or do you think, or is there any other reason?
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be the same. I don't think the shows would be as good. When he's not there for a week or whatever, we do fine. I'm not going to say that, Matt's not good at it, Oracle's not good at it, I'm not good at it. But in terms of a long-term thing, I think we would all agree, we need Joe around because he's so good at hosting, That's the thing. He's natural at it. And it wouldn't be the same.
What is your because most of them are live shows, if I'm correct, what is your sort of routine to get into that zone to be on a live show? And then what is your routine to power down afterwards?
Yeah, I've really struggled with powering down because, we end, it's usually midnight now. And I'm just now I got to go right to bed. But I've never been a person that could just do that. So I'm usually just looking at my phone or whatever for longer than I should be. As far as getting into the routine, I'll come in because this is the room where I do it in. So I'll come in here 20 or 30 minutes before, go into the StreamYard or whatever, just kind of hang out. It's not as much as I'm doing research on things that happened or taking notes or whatever. I just like to be kind of in the chair, ready to go, early and just kind of focus, get in the headspace.
Yeah. So what, do you have to do anything specific to be in that headspace, or is it just almost once the red light goes on, you're instantly in that headspace?
Yeah, usually, like I said, I'll just hang out in the StreamYard, and then the other guys will show up, and we'll talk a little bit before the show, just about whatever's going on. And then by that time, once the intro hits, I'm ready to go.
Okay. So as we look at wrapping this up, because I do want to be respectful of your time, we're going to do a very quick segment that I call generic questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before will know this, where I ask my guests their favorite match, favorite pay-per-view, favorite wrestler's theme, favorite wrestling tag team, and favorite wrestling superstar. Basically questions that Robert might get asked on social media quite regularly. So now he'll have a place to be like, look, I've answered this. Please go watch this. So what's your favorite match of all time?
Favorite match of all time? It changes. I think right now, and it might just be because I watched it last week, the John Cena and Edge TLC match. I forgot how good it was. It might be the best TLC match when you combine, it's got the violence that the first few did, but also just has this awesome storytelling because Cena's going to go to SmackDown if he loses, and it's in Toronto where Edge is from, and they've been feuding for most of the year. So I think as of right now, that's probably my favorite match, but it's also because I just watched it a couple weeks ago.
Did you know that Cena was originally supposed to lose that match and actually turn heel and go to SmackDown?
Oh, no, I actually did not know that. That's crazy.
I found that out recently, and I was like,
wow.
Oh, I get why they did it to send the crowd home happy, but I think that would have been pretty cool, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It would have given another phase. But anyway, favorite pay-per-view of all time?
SummerSlam 2002.
Why does that one speak to you?
Again, it was when I was getting into really watching, and I didn't watch the pay-per-views at that time, so I didn't really see it until a few years later. But if you look at that card, I think it's 7 matches, and they're all great. It's got the Triple H and Michaels match. It's got Brock and The Rock. And Eddie Guerrero and Edge have a good match. Kurt Angle and Rey Mysterio. So it's like mostly all of my favorite wrestlers just all in one place. And there's really no downtime. Like it's just 2.5 hours of just chaos and fun and just a lot of good matches along the way.
Favorite wrestler's theme song of all time?
Favorite wrestler's theme song of all time? I am going to go with Roman Reigns' current theme. I think might be because it fits what he's doing, fits the entrance and it just the whole mystique about him. It just it really works. And they haven't made a ton of good themes the past few years. So for them to kind of hit a home run with that one was very good.
What about favorite wrestling tag team of all time?
I think it's FTR. It was the revival even when they were in WWE. I took to them when they were in NXT and they were in the main roster and it was like, well, they're good, but not great. And then they've just had this year where I think have been pretty clearly the best tag team on the planet. Really interested in seeing what's next for those guys, whether they stay in AEW, whether they go back to WWE. But yeah, I'm going to go with FTR.
I personally, and I don't know how you feel about this, I would like to see them take the belts off the Acclaimed and have all the tag gold for the time being, personally.
Yes, absolutely.
And then finally, as we wrap this up, who's your favorite wrestler or superstar of all time?
Favorite wrestler of all time would be Brock Lesnar. Because here's the thing, when I was getting into it, he was a guy where he'd kind of just come in and the thing about his first run is he would have actual matches. Like he'd be on TV, he'd be, and he would just super athletic and all that. And so then he came back kind of right around when I started watching, like a year after I started watching, and he, reinvented himself to an extent just because, he had the UFC career. And now the first couple of years that he was back, they were kind of rough, but everything I think since the CM Punk match at SummerSlam 2013 has been excellent. The Undertaker stuff at WrestleMania was not great, but then they had a good Hell in a Cell match the next year. And then the Styles and Danielson matches, just incredible stuff. Yeah.
Should he have broken the streak? That's the question we'll wrap it up on.
Honestly, probably not, but it should have been broken long before that, to be honest with you. Like Randy Orton or Kurt Angle or someone probably could have used it more. But I don't think Brock breaking it is like this aggressively bad thing because it has added his mystique a little bit. Like he has all these accolades, including that one that no one else has. So it's been fine.
I do, and I don't know how you feel about this, I do think it would have been better if he hadn't been beaten by Cena and Triple H before the streak match. If he'd gone in unbeaten, I might have felt a bit better about it. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. So as we wrap this up, Robert, the question I end all my interviews on is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general, we're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of very weird way. So what is one piece of content from your good self you want to be remembered for? And then what is one that you're like, if you could get rid of that, I would appreciate it?
Oh, man. That's a good question because, like, I'm kind of wired in this weird way, like, where I'm my biggest critic, so I don't really like most of the stuff I do. And it's a shame to be like that because I think the Late Night Grin, flagship show, the 3 or 4 hour one every week is genuinely very good, mostly every week. We all bring a lot to the table. If I had a specific one to recommend watching, we did a whole month last year where we did drafts. So we drafted like all the men and women in WWE and then all the announcers and stuff. And those were a lot of fun. We're actually doing that again in October this year. So I would definitely pick those shows because they were just a whole lot of fun. And as far as ones that I wish that we didn't have anymore, it's not a ton. Like maybe the first one I hosted just because like it wasn't in the best like time anyway, because it was going to be a SummerSlam 2002 watch along anyway, because it was 20 years since then. So, and watch alongs are tough because you want to watch a show, but you also want to talk about it. And there were silences my first time hosting, and it was kind of a mess. So that's probably the one I would wish that I could do over.
Fair enough. So as we wrap this up, where can the good people find you and or your content?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Robert Oneil 31. Subscribe to the Late Night Grin for just $1 a month at latenightgrin.com. If you don't want to pay the $1 a month, we do plenty of stuff on Twitch too. Twitch.tv/latenightgrin. And yeah.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Irish on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talks Irish. Follow bodyslam.net wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube for my show of Cassidy Haynes, the Wrestle Watch podcast, and follow the Wrestle Watch pod on Twitter to help us pick the match that we're going to watch every week. And I will see you in the next one. A goodbye.